doing a celebrity profile about an Indian woman. She is daring, sharp, honest, fearless, and duty-bound. She has both depth and substance as a person who has brought dignity and strength into her profession. She redefined the word policing. When she started out in the police force, she was referred to as chokri, then madam, and finally sir.
She joined the police force in the 70s, and she's made waves and enemies.
When she qualified in the police service, all hell broke loose.
Towed away Indira Gandhi's car. That was a bit cheeky, wasn't it?
All these brave young men noticed there was a braver girl. And this is dangerous.
She is an Indian national tennis champ, India's first female IPS officer, social and anti-corruption activist, author, TV host, and BJP's recent political candidate for Chief Minister of Delhi. She is a hero who is full of strength and character. Today's star profile is about India's first woman IPS officer, Dr. Kiran Bedi. Dr. Kiran Bedi is a phenomenal woman, an Indian national tennis champ, India's first female IPS officer, social and anti-corruption activist, author, TV host, and BJP's recent political candidate for Chief Minister of Delhi. I recently had an opportunity to catch up with her in the Bay Area. Take a look. Dr. Bedi, it's nice to have you in the Bay Area. Welcome again.
Thank you very much. Always great to see the mother-daughter team.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you, from being an IPS officer to running several NGOs in Delhi and serving Delhi for many, many years, several decades, this year you had the opportunity to run for a chief minister position in Delhi, one of the biggest positions in Delhi. Tell me about that journey.
It's something like something has to happen, right? I think this happened like that. And it was a very important decision to take. And it was a good decision and a right decision to take at that right time. So I'm very happy, but full marks to the national party called the Bharatiya Janata Party, which brings me into its fold, offers me the highest position as far as Delhi is concerned, supports me, backs me up. It was amazing. I think very creditable for a national party to bring an outsider at that time. So the situation was very different and unique. Maybe it needed this kind of happening. It happened. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm very happy that I went through it.
Just focusing on the political aspect of it, what was your experience on the politics of India?
It's very complex. It's exceedingly complex, certainly for somebody who's not been a part of its growth, who's not been a part of its system. It's exceedingly tough because how do you get the network straight away? How do you get to know who's who? How do you understand the ideologies, the politics of each one? I think it's pretty complex for a person who's not grown in it.
Dr. Bedi, Mr. Shanti Bhushan, the founding member of the Aam Aadmi Party, also commented, he was praising you, and he said that she is most likely to give us an honest and efficient government. I know the BJP party backed you up, you were a very solid candidate, and to be a political candidate at the last minute. I'm sure the voters did not forget you for all the years that you have served Delhi. What was your experience like interacting with people on a one-on-one basis when you were part of the campaign?
I did so many road shows. I did hundreds of road shows. I traveled around the city for those 3 weeks. It was an amazing experience, how challenging the city of Delhi has become. Delhi has been unauthorizedly occupied for years and years. People living in hutments and juggies and resettlement colonies without civic amenities, very big challenge. Delhi is not what you see on the television. Delhi is what you don't see on television. I think you see it only when some settlement like this catches fire in summers. It's such a congested living. These are huddles of people, real huddles, who are deprived of basic amenities. So the vote bank is that you offer them these kinds of free facilities, and what response I got was great respect, great regard. Whether it converted into votes or not, I don't think so.
And you're saying that a lot of the votes in Delhi are essentially bought with food, water, and basic essentials that people need in the communities.
Well, that's the assessment. That the assurance of free water, which they desperately need, subsidized electricity bill, which they, as I said, there's a big have and a have not divide in the city. And have nots is almost a majority voter. Would love to get subsidized bill. Save a few hundred rupees is also a big thing. So I think they would tend to fall for such called the freebies. They did. It apparently did. I can't say that by solid evidence, but that's a general impression called the freebies.
Do you think that was your biggest challenge in dealing with voting and acquiring votes, or what were some of the other challenges you faced just being a woman in politics in Delhi?
Well, that was one of the challenges. If somebody is giving everything free, how do you compete with that? Because, and when that person is not even being asked, where are you going to find the money from? Nobody's questioning it because there are no television debates. There's no questioning as such. It's all one-way public debate, public speech. It's not a debate. The Election Commission has not brought in a debate system. So I think the Election Commission has to evolve systems of being questioned, what's your education policy and how. People have a right to know. They're not, or your power policy or your developmental policy. There's nothing like that.
Had you become Chief Minister of Delhi, what are some of the things that you think that Delhi would benefit from?
Well, that's hypothetical, but what I was saying while I was campaigning was, first of all, the issue which was lurking very, very much in people's mind was women's security. And I had offered a 6P formula of security for them, where as a Chief Minister I would bring the 6P, which means six components as stakeholders together to understand the causes of crime and how do we have prevention plan, like parents, like people, like politicians, the prisons, the police, the prosecution, the press, all that to be brought together so that even the pradhans, the priests, see, they all influence minds. So my whole method of women's security was one where I would act as a hub to analyze the crimes against women every month and reach out to the people as to understand the cause of crime, what can we do to prevent it, and how do we deal with it effectively. This was one of my planks. Second was vocational skills. I had said in my campaign that no government school or a building which can be turned into a polytechnic or a vocational skill would be not utilized as a double building. That means why should a building be closed at underutilized by 3 p.m.? Why can't we have an evening polytechnic schools? Delhi has such a great sports infrastructure because of Asian Games and Commonwealth Games, but it doesn't have a single sports university. So I had said we'll have a sports university. We will have hundreds and hundreds of overnight polytechnics and vocational skills schools, which means that there's a great job creation, there's great entrepreneurship suddenly. I could have linked companies with different schools. So that means the government doesn't spend anything. I have the building infrastructure, which is the most expensive input. And I could link it with companies that say, you run hospitality, you run retail management, you run physiotherapy courses, so you run a music school. So according to the need of the people, they could have gone to these polytechnics, which is impossible to otherwise start overnight and do skills development. Government has such great budgeting today for skills development. So I was mentioning about security, I was talking about skills development, entrepreneurship, I was talking about sports, I was talking about traffic management, etc. Because having been part of the police services, how it needed modernization and best technology. So there were a lot of issues, but I couldn't match the freebies.
I wanted to address, I know this year and for the past couple of years, women's safety and security has been such a phenomenal issue. Do you think that has changed over the decades? Do you think it was always unsafe for women, or do you think it's just gotten worse over time? Or do you think it's because of media involvement and education, do you think it's just become more, it's come to the surface now?
It's come to the surface, not no. Women's mobility is much more increased, but so has the violence increased. So has reporting increased. Earlier women were tolerating it, they were not so much in public space, now they are. There's also conflict. where there is a category of men who are not, who it's like it's like the youth, a segment of youth which is not prepared to accept this. There's still a very large segment of people not willing to accept this change. And then there's a modernization, there is greater visibility, there's much more different kind of dress sense. And I think some of them people are not still reconciled or adjusted to this. The preference of this for the son remains. Earlier women were not reporting, they were tolerating it. So after the movements, it's much more reporting. Police is becoming more responsive. Police too was not registering and trying to shirk away. So things have changed, but so have incidents increased.
Yes.
And laws have become tougher. Okay. Even though laws have become tougher, the justice system is not as fast as it should be. In fact, rather it's still slow. So it's not kept pace with the challenges of crimes against women.
The Nirbhaya case and the Nirbhaya documentary has, of course, trying to reach everywhere, and there's a ban on it in India.
Well, in the wisdom of the parliament and in the thinking of the government of India, they think it would sensationalize and it would embarrass. And probably it had not followed a due process of filming. That's what their view is, and that's what the parliament view is. But I personally feel that the content is worth being confronted with people if you have to really prevent crimes against women. The content is stark truth, which if people confronted with, it could be used as a tool for social revolution and reformation, particularly of those mindsets which are still very, very strongly misogynist and medieval, almost primitive, because they feel woman is still a harmless domestic animal, public space doesn't belong to her, and if she's being raped, she should just surrender, because that's a man's right to her body. So this was the kind of interview which this man said. That's the misogynist viewpoint, and that's exactly, and we needed to find out whether this man, how many of such kind of people still exist.
This was the first time you ran for a political position. I know you're not a political person, but you do work for human rights and issues. Would you ever run again?
Can say nothing, because I used to say earlier that I never run for political office, and I did. So I have now, and sometimes there are set of circumstances which all sometimes converge and assemble, which make a situation happen. So I would probably never say never.
Okay, wonderful. It's good to hear that, because I'd like to see you you do phenomenal work overall, and you've done work in public safety and, of course, education. What are you currently doing in your NGOs to address both of these things as much as you can?
Our last 26 years, I've been, the two foundations which I have, the Navjyoti and India Vision Foundation, are doing remarkable work in crimes against women, education of children, prisoners, rural, slum dwellers, all communities, remedial education. We don't let any child drop out. And I'm talking of thousands of children. We're doing a lot of early leadership training programs. We're doing skills development. We run community colleges, run environment issues. I educate prisoners' children. So the two foundations are brilliant. There's a great team, great leadership, counselors, teachers, professors, managers, administrators. Remarkable work, all in supported by corporates and individual sponsors from within India and overseas. So it's these are such excellent models of community work which make all the difference in others' lives. Even now, when I just came here, I did a convocation, and when I gave away certificates to some women in rural areas in our villages of vocational skills, all those women who got the vocational skill still were permitted by their fathers. Permitted. Had they not been permitted by their fathers, by our persuasion, those girls would still not have learned to even stitch and tailor. So we're talking about such communities still. So whatever we do every day touches thousands of lives, and it makes all the difference, makes them employable, makes them skilled, and makes them much better persons.
What do you think is the change that's required to change the mindset? I mean, if I think of my parents and my family and your families, a lot of the way we've been raised has been in a very modern society with modern thinking, and with the thinking that we can be educated, we can reach our goals and do whatever we need that's required for our lives to have a successful life. Why do you think that there is such a mindset, and what can be done to change? It requires a lot of change with, the way the Sharma, the attorney that was in the Nirbhaya case. I mean, there's other attorneys in there, and I'm sure there's other people that have that mindset. What is required to change that?
Very, very intensive education. Because otherwise, how do you change? Which impacts. So you have a person in law profession exactly speaking the language of the convict, which he said if he would make sure that his daughter doesn't get into evening space, and he used a very, very torturous way how he'd punish his daughter if she would be out in the evenings without his permission. Very, very brutal. So it's all about nurturance. It's all about nurturance, how they're nurtured by parents, how they are nurtured by schools. So teachers in the school or universities and parents as teachers at home are actually the mind makers. They're the mind creators. They have a very big onerous responsibility to provide to the society balanced minds, which value dignity as humans, women as persons, and women not as men and women as persons, where they're nurtured equally, given equal opportunity, so that each one's potential is realized. I think it's all about nurturance, and the onus is on the teachers, whether at home or outside.
From the government perspective, what is the government doing as far as creating more safe environments for women and women's rights in India?
Well, it's government plus, it's government and people, government and non-profit organizations, government men and women. It's quite a holistic aware government and police. Government means also police. Putting aside, besides money, it's got the Nirbhaya fund, but that's not enough. I think it's a holistic, but I would still say it's not enough. It must create a whole movement of social revolution. And this film, which they have banned, could have been used to kickstart a whole social revolution. Country needs, because ghar ghar ki kahani hai. It's almost ghar ghar ki kahani, which is, so only government cannot do. Ghar ghar ki kahani, school ki kahani, har classroom ki kahani, har neighborhood ki kahani, har gaon ki kahani. It's like ghar ghar ki kahani. It's village, it's institutional kahani. It's a business, it's a workplace ki kahani. Every place matters. How, like for instance, flexi hours for women. It's an office ki kahani, so that there's no sexual harassment of women at the workplace. So how can government be everywhere? But government sets policies, government has passed laws, government must invest into fast track. What I think government can do is faster justice. Must insist faster justice. I think that's judicial responsibility too. How do you get predictive, faster justice?
I noticed that in the Nirbhaya case, they brought a charge sheet in within 17 days, which is required generally by 90 days by the police. Can you talk about how that has changed over the 30 years or 26 years that you have been working? Because even to do that now is a big deal.
Well, what is the case which gets highlighted and is known moves faster, but those who don't get highlighted face the same kind of delay yet. So as I said, it has to be a very holistic plan where bar councils are involved, the government of India is involved, the judiciary is concerned. These are all, because faster judiciary means more courts, which means more budgets, and also means more action by the state governments. Because if the government of India gives you funds, state governments have to implement, set up the courts, appoint the judges.
Now, this documentary is being banned, and maybe at some point it'll come out in all over India. Do you think that Bollywood, which is very influential and influences young minds, it's in every village in India, theaters, big screens everywhere. Do you think film can influence this in some way? Film can influence public safety, women's safety?
Films impact a lot. In India, films are very, very impacting. As it is, every picture speaks 1,000 words. Yes, but then which is why in the recent last few months and years, you don't see item songs around in the films. These have been discouraged, disallowed in a way. So the censorship has become much more intensive and sensitive to women's rights, women's presentation, the way women are projected.
Running for office, you had a lot of things that you wanted to talk about as far as women's rights and general public safety and education. But as an individual that's in India, or any individual, what can people do to ensure safety and to force the government or pressure the government into having more safe environments for people in general?
Well, any political party to come back to power will have to deliver. So I think that the onus now is on the government in power. It has to come back, reclaim the votes which it has, is to provide priorities, and including security for women. And they can generate a lot of ideas. They can ask people to give them ideas. But now the onus is on government in power, which has been voted to power, to provide the security which it promises. But there's no dearth of ideas.
So, Dr. Bedi, what's next for you?
Next is I go to speak at Bernard College in Columbia. I think I would like to look at what comes now, what comes immediately. I think it's continuing to pursue my creative activities, creative potential, do my own public space. I think let's flow with time.
Well, it's great to talk to you, and you haven't changed a bit. It's nice to see your vigor and energy and enthusiasm towards all the work that you do. Thank you so much for your time.
Wonderful meeting you yet again. Thank you.
A hero is a person really intent on making this place a better place for all people. A hero is a person, typically a man, who has been admired for his distinguished courage and acts. But here, we are talking about hero, that is, her plus O, her outstanding achievements. An ordinary individual who finds strength to preserve and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles. Someone who dares. Our hero, India's first women IPS officer, Kiran Bedi.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and my profile on Dr. Kiran Bedi. To advertise, send me a message, feedback, and show ideas. Our contact number is 510-304-8654, and our email is info@satare.com or satare@gmail.com. Until I see you again, I'm your host Kavita. See you next time on Satare.